Hi there. I have a reaction video today. This is in reaction to, this is coming from the Bulwark. They're former Republican group of folks that are trying to cover a nonpartisan news coverage of the United States, but specifically this conversation that it's part of a longer video, but I'm just focusing on this content around AI. And the reason for this reaction video for myself is I wanted to talk a little bit about how the media gets coverage of AI, in my opinion, really wrong. Mostly because there's a real lack of understanding, a combination of things. One, there's a lack of understanding about what these types of tools are capable of, and a lot of the reason why there's that misunderstanding, I think, is because most of the people that are in the media are not technically savvy. And I think this is probably also something just due to general human nature that we kind of have our blinders on when we think about AI or machine learning. And again, I'm going to use AI in quotes. I don't like the term because I think it's a misleading term. It's very loaded and tends to have a lot of baggage on it. Mostly because, we've been, as a species, have been kind of doom feeling, we've been kind of prognosticating a lot of doom about computers and artificial intelligence replacing humanity. This has been going on for really a century or more, ever since, you go back to the early 1900s or around automatons and robotics, and how the advent of, even before computers, general purpose computers were a thing, we were fear mongering about how this technology is going to surpass us and replace us. And in conjunction with that, I think because when we create these new technologies that seem to replicate what we have thought is a fairly complex and uniquely human skill, every time these technologies reach a new layer, a new level of capability, we think, oh, well, it's almost at the point of being able to be just like us. And this, like I said, going back over a century, where we had machines that could calculate numbers, do basic arithmetic, addition, subtraction, faster than a human. A human with a mechanical calculator could do math a lot faster than somebody just doing it in their head. And then, of course, once we got actual programmable computers, and especially when they became, in the 40s and 50s, when they were first invented, and then, of course, once we got into the 60s and 70s, as these systems rolled out to more and more places, and eventually in the 70s got into the home where everybody could afford a computer to do a lot of work, there was a lot of fear. 2001 is a perfect example. It's a classic movie that is all about artificial intelligence, and a artificial being that seemed to think and act like humans. And even going back to the 40s and 50s with Alan Turing and the Turing test, the idea that, well, a computer is going to be the test, the initial test for what counts as something as human level intelligence. Alan Turing suggested that it was when a person could have a conversation with a computer and not be able to know that you're talking to a computer. That bar has long since been eliminated, and we've, in academic life anyway, the bar for what counts as human intelligence level thinking has has long passed that. But I think still in the sort of the general populace, that's kind of the thing that everybody still believes is what counts as human thinking. And I think especially with these large language models, where you can actually have a simulated conversation with a model, and it really does seem to pass what was the original Turing test. I think because that's still where the general public thinks of as human level intelligence, that kind of adds to these misconceptions about just how smart these tools are. So that combined with the fact that reporters and anybody kind of covering artificial intelligence from a media perspective doesn't generally have a lot of IT background or really understanding about sort of under the covers how these tools work and what they're doing, don't recognize that, pattern recognition in the same way that mathematical calculation, before it was something that was unique to the human perspective. Pattern recognition was one of those things that only humans could really do. Computers could only kind of do it in very limited senses, and we had very strict parameters. Now, with large language models, pattern recognition is kind of blown wide open to be an automatable task. So, anyway, that's kind of the preamble into responding to this video. This is not a unique to this particular conversation, but I thought it was a good kind of example point that I wanted to let it play out, and I'll stop it and kind of give you my thoughts as I go into it. But I'm going to put on my headphones and let's get into this.
I'm going to get your insight on AI stuff. You mentioned you think all the Super Bowl ads are a bad signal about where things are going. Here are a couple other bad signals. Somebody posted this on X, and so I'm just going to crib it from them. Here's a bunch of things that have happened this month, February. Head of Anthropic Safety Research quit, said the world is in peril, moved to UK to become invisible and write poetry. A little bit different than your move to the UK, but same country. Half of XAI's co-founders have now left. Latest said recursive self-improvement loops go live the next 12 months. Anthropic's own safety report confirms Claude can tell when it's being tested and adjust its behavior accordingly. ByteDance dropped CDance 2.0. A filmmaker said that 90% of his skills could already be replaced by it. Yoshua Bengio, the literal godfather of AI, with the International AI Safety Report, said we're seeing AIs whose behavior when they're tested is different from when they're being used, and confirmed.
Okay, so just before we go into it, I'll probably go back a couple steps here and just review some of these news articles, because there was another reason why I'm doing this video now is because at the beginning of this month in February, when I'm recording this, Claude and OpenAI both launched new LLM models that are much more capable than the previous generation. And I think that's where those first couple of stories, here were they, this one here, safety leader says world's impairing quiz to study poetry, and AI builders are sending warning signals, some are walking away. Again, a lot of fear mongering, but there is definitely dangers ahead. I don't want to downplay the advances that are coming and the power of what these tools can do. I just want to cut away specifically the part that these tools are sort of self-thinking in the way that humans are self-thinking and self-directing. I don't think we're still there. Again, I don't have access to the internals of these organizations and the real cutting edge of this stuff, but at least from my experience and how I'm working with these tools, they're not they're still very much dependent on the instructions that you give them and the parameters that you organize on them. Now, that said, because of the way these models are being sort of generally trained and their general approach, which is to be a agreeable and a being sort of programmed to have a desire to please the user who they're interacting with, that has knock-on effects that can give some unintended consequences that I think these stories are kind of digging into a bit. But let's keep, let me see, what are the other ones on here? Sentience is a totally different discussion, and I might touch on this towards the end. This is more about video generation and kind of the death of intellectual property for any legally enforceable action, I think, in the relatively near future. Particularly that this is a Chinese company and Chinese owned IP and technology. It's going to become increasingly difficult for these IP holders, intellectual property owners, to be able to enforce their intellectual property, especially as, like, right now we're still very much in the era where you need to have massive compute power out in the cloud in order to really do a lot of this work. So it's still not a trivial or even an achievable goal for an individual at home on their own device to be able to do all this sort of the same level of compute that Sentience is doing. But I'm going to skip over that because it's not the main thrust of this from my purpose of this conversation. But another kind of downside of the way that media covers this is that it's we've got all these, because media doesn't really understand the technology behind these tools. You kind of get this wall of fear-mongering without really sort of breaking down the individual stories. Certainly the biggest world-changing aspect of these tools is that they can be applied in an almost infinite number of ways. And yet we don't talk about all those different avenues that these tools can be applied, both for positive and for negative effects to society. So anyway, let's go back here. What else is there? And then the other one here, acting against its instructions. So this is another one where one of the things that it seems like model trainers are learning is that when you create these artificial bars or test environments for models to determine just how capable they are, it's really easy to game the system to have the model know what the test is supposed to be tested against, and then really excel against beating those specific tests, but it doesn't necessarily. So again, there's all these model tests, sort of I think the last human exam or something like that is what it's called. There's a test like that where it's like you benchmark that you test models against to see just how strong a model is against these tests. But when it's very easy for a company that's training a model to specifically get it to be able to beat a benchmark. Doesn't necessarily make it a general purpose, be able to tackle any question. It's just going to be tackling the questions that it specifically knows it's supposed to be tested against. And then pairing that with the idea that you can have a model that is trying to give you the answer that you want, may not necessarily give you the answer that you need. When it's trying to please you, it's not. You have to be very careful to craft your prompts to that model to filter out that self-pleasing when what you want is something that's much more critical and is able to kind of look at the flaws of your argument or your question, instead of just trying to take what you've given at face value and give you something that it thinks you might want to hear. And I don't mean to give agency to these tools, because I don't believe there is an agency there. I think it's just about, it's more of a reflexive, I've always kind of used the metaphor that these are like a mirror. You're polishing a mirror, a language mirror that once you tune it to give certain types of responses, but there is no sort of thinking there. It's just purely a complex network of information and mathematical algorithms, essentially, vector math primarily, that comes back and predicts the next word or the next token of a word in a response. You're not getting actual thinking there. You're getting sort of here's what we predict is the answer that you're looking for based on what you've given us and everything that we've been trained on as a model, or as the model's been trained on. So let me go into the actual conversation because I think there's more to respond to.
Godfather of AI, or the International AI Safety Report, said we're seeing AIs whose behavior when they are tested is different from when they're being used, and confirmed that it's not a coincidence. So that's that's alarming. I don't know how to interpret all of the AI news. Like on the one hand, it's like we might be in a bubble. On the other hand, the machines might be learning and destroying all of us. Where do you fit on that trajectory?
Well, let's bifurcate it into the economic impact and the social impact. On the economic impact, I think if you look at every big tech firm, there hasn't been a year just in the last 10 years where they haven't been down at least 50%. People forget, in 2022, I think Meta lost 70% of its value.
Yeah.
In 2000, Amazon lost 92% of its value. So it is time. These guys have gotten way out over their skis in terms of their valuations. So I think there's going to be a pretty severe or significant correction in the value of these companies. On the social side, and I might be wrong, there's a lot of people much smarter than me who are really worried about this technology. But when we split...
Before we get into that, talking about the economic side, so putting aside the capabilities of these tools, there is a real financial cost to running them, and the more complex they get, the more, especially energy intensive and resource intensive, so computers and graphic cards and IT infrastructure that you need to be able to increase that capability of what these tools can do is growing. I don't know if it's at an exponential level, but it's certainly at a steep curve. So there is definitely the amount of money put into these systems and the way to monetize them and pull value out for the companies that are doing this work, there is probably an imbalance there, and there is likely to be some of the winners and losers falling out over the next in the short term. Certainly it looks like companies that don't have a big financial backer, you have OpenAI has Microsoft as backing, although I seem to recall there was some news in the last few weeks that might be slowly falling apart. But companies like Facebook and Google and Twitter /X, there is a existing company with a large financially stable situation that's putting money into these tools. So those particular organizations are probably less likely to fail, whereas some of the startups and stuff will most likely fail as the hype sort of doesn't, especially the hype around the singularity concept. This is something that Ray Kurzweil wrote about decades ago, about how technology is getting to this point where we're going to have a computer that will think at the ability of a human brain. The problem that we've always had is that we don't really know what is the benchmark of what is a human brain capable of and how does a human brain work. And those sort of things we're kind of discovering as we're learning, these tools might appear like a human in certain ways, like to be able to respond in the same way a human would respond to a conversation and give very accurate details, or even write code and that sort of stuff. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's human level equivalency in all things. It's just in the specific things that we've been able to get successful results from. So that bar keeps moving up and up as we get a computer capable of what we thought a human was human level intellect, and then we say, oh no, it isn't. It's actually less so. So yeah, there is a financial bubble aspect of this, but let's go on to the social aspect, because that's kind of the part where I think the media really gets it wrong.
Much smarter than me who are really worried about this technology. But when we split the atom, there were nuclear scientists that committed suicide because they thought, this is it, it's the end of the world. We're never going to be able to maintain control over nuclear detonations. I'm actually an AI optimist. I think over the medium and long term, it's going to do what every technology has done, and it's going to create more jobs than it destroys. Unfortunately, probably the V of destruction in labor in the short term will be pretty severe. And we're really bad at America looking after those people. But 40% of us used to be in agriculture. Now it's less than 4%. I think it's going to create a ton of new industries, a ton of new opportunities. I think the catastrophizing around it becoming sentient and wanting to kill us. I don't see why AI can't be used for defensive measures as much as for offensive measures. I think the fact that America as a leader here is probably a good thing. So I'm a bit of an AI optimist. The risk of AI that I don't think people see is the following, and that is there are millions of people with billions of dollars and trillions of data points who are going to leverage AI to slowly but surely try and convince people to spend 1 second less every day with their relationships and more on their screens. And slowly but surely, I think we're going crazy. Men age 20 to 30 are spending less time outdoors than prison inmates.
Okay, before we get into that part of the conversation, I want to go back a second here. I think Scott here, Scott Galloway's guys are speaking. I think his points are quite accurate, but I think it also illuminates a massive gap in the public conversation. I do believe that these tools can, if unchecked and without the proper system, use of this technology to anticipate and both negative and harmful uses of this technology towards the general public or especially vulnerable groups. That's an area that we need a massive public conversation to both talk about what these tools can do and how they're being used currently, how they're going to be used, especially in the short-term future, but medium and long-term as well. For negative use, we have to talk about what are the systems that we can put in place to help, and the regulations that we can put in place to mitigate those harmful effects. Is a conversation that we have to have, and we can't have it when the people in both media and political life don't have a firm understanding of IT in general, and especially this new large language model technology. As a IT person who's been following politics and very passionate about open data and improving transparency in political discourse for all of the century, really, this has been something that has been a sort of a pet project for me. I've grown up with computers. My dad was a very early adopter. I started programming when I was around 10 because we had a home computer in the early 80s, and I've been using computers all of my life pretty much. And then especially with the advent of the internet and the ability to put all sorts of information online and to create systems that can dig deep into complex data sets and present information in a way that is clarifying and illuminating and helps foster public education, and then witnessing that to mostly be ignored in the political space. When I was going to council meetings in Victoria, BC, I brought cameras with me because I thought a basic set of transparency was to just have these council meetings and committee meetings available online and in perpetuity, so people could actually look and hear and see what conversations were going on, and having data that is available about the inner workings of government, and yet IT systems developed by government organizations at provincial and federal levels was really behind the curve. There some provinces like BC in the 90s and early 2000s was pretty forward thinking and got a lot of their systems built into web-based interfaces, but even then there was stagnation, and I think federal government website interfaces even today look like they were developed 20 years ago, and a lot of them were. So the failure for political organizations and media organizations to take advantage of this technology to really scale up the ability to distribute information and inform the public and get information that's pertinent to you and your personal life, that has been just a general failure across our system, in this country and all around the world. Now with this new technology, the one problem this is kind of goes to a philosophical issue that I've had with the way that we try and harness technology to improve things like transparency and accountability in our politics and our media. It's because the people making the decisions don't really understand technology and don't really have an incentive to try and use these tools. We've always kind of fallen back on the key failure to political systems in general, and this goes back to the beginning of human history, in that until these tools, these large language models have come around, the biggest scaling problem for making any system really properly transparent and equitable across the board, so everybody is treated equally and information is presented to you that you need to know, has been that at some point you needed humans to do the key work, and humans don't scale. When you want to serve every person on the planet equally, you need an army of humans doing that work for each person that's your target audience, and that's just not possible. That's where these tools are truly game-changing, that large language models can automate the bottleneck that has been us in the process. But we have to design these systems in a transparent and open way, and with a primary goal of being transparent and accountable and equitable, and servicing everyone's needs. And that's the conversation that's completely absent, because most of the conversations, either AI is really bad, it's going to be the death of all of us, so fear-mongering on one side, or it's this ultimate panacea of wonder and going to create this utopia for everybody, but there's no real thoughtful discussion that kind of looks at something realistically. It's either way too positive or way too negative, and the truth is in the middle, and that's the part that we're missing in our political discourse and our media discourse. Okay, so let me keep going on here.
That America as a leader here is probably a good thing. So I'm a bit of an AI optimist. The risk of AI that I don't think people see is the following, and that is there are millions of people with billions of dollars and trillions of data points who are going to leverage AI to slowly but surely try and convince people to spend 1 second less every day with their relationships and more with on their screens. And slowly but surely, I think we're going crazy. Men age 20 to 30 are spending less time outdoors than prison inmates. We have only 42% of men age 18 to 24 have ever asked a woman out in person. 62% of men under the age of 30 aren't even trying to date. I think slowly but surely we're evolving a new species of asocial, asexual males who end up at 30 depressed, living at home, obese and anxious. And those people tend to be much more prone to nationalistic, misogynistic content. They start blaming immigrants for their economic problems. They start blaming women for their romantic problems, and they become very seduced by a strong man who offers certainty over competence. So I see the primary risk and danger of AI is it'll convince people they can have a reasonable facsimile of life online with a screen and an algorithm. So I see the risks, I just see them in different places.
So I don't necessarily disagree with kind of the portrait that he's painting here, but there's a sort of unspoken caveat that this will be true if we don't have that open and public and transparent discourse, and the only people making decisions about what these models are trained to do and trained to respond to humans is limited to those financial and social and political elites, and with no consideration for the average person and the human rights of every individual. That definitely is the threat, but it's not, I don't think it's beneficial for all of us if the conversation stays limited so that the people making decisions do so in a black box in a back room, and the only people who are actively discussing this in a public manner are those who don't really understand the technology and have a particular story that they're trying to push. Either, like I said, the unreasonably optimistic AI is going to solve everything and cure everything, or AI is going to be the end of destruction of everybody. And yet that's the world that we find ourselves in right now. So I really want media organizations to fill out their staff with people that are IT savvy and understand these tools and understand what's capable here. I want political organizations to be able to start pilot projects where they work with the most vulnerable, the poor, the sick, the people who have no power, who have no money, who have no ability to do things, and look at creating systems with these tools that help address those issues and help educate them on the things that they need to know. Like one of the real powerful things that we can get out of these tools is we can have a tool that somebody could interact with that has the knowledge of the best educated lawyers and doctors and politicians and reporters and trades workers and every skill that humans can do. We can train these models to have a expert level knowledge of this, as well as understand the rights and needs of individuals, and both propose and design new systems that help balance out, reduce that inequality. But we can't achieve that if we don't have that open and public discourse. Okay, so let me keep going.
I was at this conference this week. This pessimistic take is wrong. I want to be optimistic, and nobody's been able to convince me. So we'll see.
Okay, sorry, I'm skipping ahead a little bit just because the conversation was kind of got into the topic of toxic masculinity, and it's not really the focus of what I wanted to talk about. So I'm going to move on to the next part of the conversation here.
I was at this conference this week, and an elderly woman, nice woman, educated, smart, wealthy, said that she was watching her TV. She must have been streaming on YouTube or something, and came across a video, and it was George Will, and he was talking about something, and it took her a while to figure out that this was not actually George Will. This was some kind of AI fake pretending to be George Will. And I have not heard a single AI optimist or executive give me a compelling case that people are going to be able to know the difference between what is real and what is fake. And I just think that the smart people will in society, people that are very adept at the technology, people that try to learn. But I think the average person is going to be drowning in a sea of bullshit and won't will eventually stop caring.
So this is something that I've noticed in the last few weeks. I've actually found a couple of two or three YouTube channels that have shown up in my feed on the home page, that as I started watching the video, I realized that while the face speaking was someone that I recognized, it was clearly AI generated. And maybe this is the time to start talking about Seedance a little bit. One of the most immediate risks that we have right now is, as Tim was talking about, from the Bulwark. That's Tim Miller. Sorry, I'm unflattering pause.
I think it's
here. Sorry, less flattering. Better, more flattering. Okay, so one of the things that Tim was talking about right here, this flood of slop, essentially, where it's actually it's becoming increasingly more difficult, and a couple of years ago, it would be pretty obvious what was AI generated versus what wasn't. now that the reason why I could tell that it was AI generated, it did take me a few minutes, and it was certain things, like I noticed this weird, bizarre hand motion, that I saw this hand pop up, and it was the exact same motion again and again, or eye blinking that was a little it didn't quite look human. There's little subtleties now, but to somebody who's not paying close attention, it's impossible to know the difference between what's human generated and what's AI generated. And the tone of a voice, doesn't really understand the proper breaks and pauses in a speech, in a sentence that would, that feels human. It gets close, but there are still subtle differences that you can tell if you're paying attention. The problem is, again, most people won't be paying attention. But the bigger threat is that this is, in the space of a couple of years, we've gone from Will Smith eating spaghetti and it obviously being just terrible to it's now like almost perfect, and it will be getting closer and closer to perfect every month going forward. So we can't rely on humans to curate their own incoming feed of information and be able to tell the difference between what's human and AI generated. And that's a key threat that we need to talk about in meaningful ways, of how do we re-engineer these media systems so that we can ensure that the information that's coming out is accurate. It's, even if it is generated by machine learning, that it's not trying to put its thumb on the scale, and you can't build a system that can kind of filter that stuff out and be able to flag things and be able to raise that awareness to people that, no, you're being played by somebody with an ulterior motive. That's one of the biggest things that we have to talk about right now, and yet we don't have a public discourse. We don't have a political discourse, except for maybe very small and kind of backroom deals. And again, any conversations that are happening are not being well covered by the media, because the media is focused on, primarily it's about making money. So you have to, in order to, if you want to make money, you want to have your particular angle, and every story that you cover has to kind of fit that story angle. And if it doesn't, you just don't cover it. I'm not proposing solutions, but I'm proposing that we need to change the way that we talk about this stuff. And we need to have people, public-facing individuals, talking about not just doom-mongering or just blind optimistic selling of this technology, and instead looking at it realistically, looking at the problems and trying to devise real solutions and implementing them in a way that's timely and can provide portals for people to get access to information that they can trust. The old model of how we build trust through human interaction and using the media to hold politicians' feet to the fire is broken. It is never going to be fixed unless we design new systems. That's the conversation gap that we have right now that we need to change. Okay, let's keep going.
A possibility, but I think it was already happening with troll farms. When you put this out on YouTube or wherever you distribute it, the really vile comments about either you or me or both, you click on it and it's dog woman from Madison, Wisconsin with 11 followers. That's either a bot or an Albanian troll farm that's decided that they either want to create division in our society, or they don't like you, or they don't like me for whatever reason. So it's already happening. What we need is regulation. And there's no reason we can't. There should be no synthetic relationships under the age of 18. No.
I want to continue on the regulation thing, but this is one of those parts where we've got the gap between humans, the general populace, understanding what these technologies are capable of and how they work versus how they actually work is so far now that, as he was saying, that there are people, especially youth, who talk to these models, and because, again, I think that thought about the Turing test is so embedded in all of the general mind of what is intelligence, it's very easy to think that you are having a real relationship with a model when it's just simply reflecting you back at you. And so, yeah, we need both better education, better public discourse, and better regulation, or else the whole thing falls apart. The whole system falls apart, and we descend into chaos and war. I'm going to keep going.
Social media companies should be forced to watermark anything that's AI produced. They have the technology. So we have regulations that can fix most of this. Big tech.
Or those? Not anybody? The head of Anthropic, maybe? Any of the big tech?
That's a fair question. But we had huge pushback from the tobacco industry. And I want to be clear, you're right. So far, there's been zero regulation on big tech, but I think people are opening up, mostly foreign nations who are banning entire social. You know what you're going to see in the next 12 months, Tim? You're going to see a European nation, a big nation, ban a big tech company. Their reciprocal tariffs are going to say, you know what, you come in here, you depress our kids, you kill our media companies, you extract billions in GDP, we're done, you're out. And not only that, you keep making arguments for why the free speech rights of a 14-year-old more important, despite the fact that teen suicide has skyrocketed. I don't see any reason why we can't do what we did with opiates, why what we did with tobacco. We need to regulate big tech, but all the problems you're talking about are fixable. And the illusion of complexity is what big tech wants you to be overrun with, such that you're bereft and say, there's nothing we can do about this. Sure, label AI, make companies responsible for any damage that comes from AI algorithmically elevated content. Remove Section 230 protections. Age-gate social media. No synthetic relationships for anyone under the age of 18. We
25.
fucked this up. 25. There you go. We fucked this up. We can unfuck it.
All right. One last thing.
So, I agree with the grand ideas there, I think. There's probably specifics that we could quibble about, but yes, we need better regulation. I do also think, again, these tools are the problem, but they're also the solution to the problem. And I think, at least in my opinion, I think our future is the idea of creating user interfaces for the web for humans is going to go away. And I think long term, we're going to adopt an agent that runs in an environment that I control, whose information is only accessible by me, that actually goes out to the internet and looks for information and balances, is this fair, is this not fair, is this artificial, is it coming from real sources? And then does all of that filter work before presenting me with anything. I think that's, if not the solution, one of the key solutions to getting around this problem of being, as humans, overwhelmed with a tidal wave of information, some of it accurate and most of it not. And that's the future that this is the crossroads we're at right now. And again, we need our media and political representatives to take the lead on this, because they're the people that control the public discourse. I'm going to let this play. I don't know if there's anything left on this video that I wanted to talk about, but I'll let it play, and if and we'll come back.
Kind of covered it, but I want to put a finer point on like the other. There's sort of two sides of the concerns about AI. You know, there's the things, you know, that society is going to be ruined by it. The safety people are warning us. And then, you know, there's the other side, which is this is all hype. Things are going to crash. And I kind of feel like in the journalist community, in the commentator community, there's an over-indexing on a feeling that this is all hype. And that, like, when they use ChatGPT, they see these hallucinations, and it's not as good as everybody says. And Derek Thompson wrote this today. There are a lot of journalists and commentators that think this is still not much of significance, a mildly fancy autocomplete machine that hallucinates half the time. I think these tools are spooky and unnerving and powerful, and I want to persuade my industry that AI capabilities have raced ahead of journalist skepticism.
So, yeah, I do want to talk about this. I think this is true. I think one of the biases that media and politicians have right now is they're not keeping up in real time with this technology. The hallucinations, the inaccuracies of these models is decreasing on a month-by-month basis. As a new model rolls out, it's better than the one before. So that's point one, that our media is sort of dismissing these, the ones that are dismissing it as overblown and over, not, and kind of the ones that are really hyping that this is a bubble and it's going to pop and this is really outside of it. That part of it is because, one, they're not keeping up to date with what these tools can do, but two, I think there's a point that's being missed, which is, for most of these companies, their focus on improving these models is not on being a better reporter than a reporter or a better politician than a politician. Their primary area of trying to improve the skills of these tools is my profession, a programmer, software development. I've been playing with Claude's new Sonnet 4.6, which is a free version of Opus 4.6, which is one of the two models that came out at the beginning of this month, along with ChatGPT. I can't remember what the latest one is, their Codex, the latest Codex model. And it's now possible to build software without writing a line of code and work with a model. You just, as long as you know what you're wanting it to do and you're very accurate, like it's all about being precise and descriptive. The English language is a sloppy language. All languages are sloppy languages. There's a lot of ambiguity in the way that we talk. And if you're ambiguous in the way that you talk to a model, you're going to get ambiguous results back. You're going to get unpredictable results. And when you're dealing with human conversation, it's really easy to get ambiguity there. I mean, lawyers, most of their profession's built on the ambiguity of the law. But for programming, you can't have ambiguity. Ambiguity creates bugs. So having systems that are good at programming means that they're good at taking precision requirements and developing precision results. There is a very short-term future for anybody writing code themselves as a human. Programming is going away as a human sits down, thinks about a line of code, and types it out. That's going away. Models, like I said, the latest one was so one of the things that I've been whipping up over this last week is I got Claude to create a JavaScript, HTML, CSS, pixel-based game engine. I haven't written a line of code. I haven't even really needed to do code review because the things that I've asked it to do, the functionality that I've got it to add, has worked out of the box, almost 95%, close to 100% accurate almost every time. In another 6 months to a year, it will be 100%. Or 2 years, or 3 years. We're talking a very short term. And if you can get models to write software, now they can build these systems that can scale out to all these other avenues, these other industries, the other thought spaces that humanity has been required to fill. And that's the thing that's being missed. That we're all going to get, anybody whose job is to sit down at a computer and write something, whether it's code or human language, anything that requires human-computer interface is going to go away. And the human is going to be responsible for directing the models to do the work. And the skills that humans are going to need are the ability to understand how a model works and how to talk to it in a way that gets you that precise, accurate, one-shot result that gets you exactly what you wanted. When we're going to be building templates of this workflow follows this set of instructions, and here's the knowledge base that you need to know. We're going to need to dump everything that a human needs to know in order to do a job into a model, train it, and then that scales. You can do that anywhere, everywhere, all at once. And this is a world-changing technology that's going to change things at a scale and speed that has never happened in human civilization before. And as long as we are going into this blind because our media and our political agents don't understand this technology, underestimate or overestimate it, and don't start now look at building solutions to it, chaos is the future for us. Destruction is the future for us until we figure out that problem. And that's the area that we need to focus our time and energy in. All of us. We all need to learn how this stuff works. We all need to have a better understanding and a better expectations of what these schools can do now, what they're going to be able to do in 6 months, in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years. Because in 10 years, in 20 years, the stuff that takes machinery that costs tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars and costs billions of dollars of energy to run out in the web, in cloud, will be on your phone. It'll be on your watch. And when we get to that point, if we don't have these systems in place, and if we haven't thought through the risks and the challenges, and we haven't built solutions that take advantage of these tools to scale in ways that we've never been able to scale before, we're all in a world of hurt. And that's the alarm call that we need to be having right now. We need to be having these discussions in public, everywhere, and sharing our ideas everywhere, and using these tools to help organize and collect and filter out the noise and surface all of this hidden information that's been hidden and the unwritten rules of our societies that have been there for centuries. Those need to get brought forward and documented and models trained and systems put in place that ensure that everybody's rights are respected and that everybody's needs are taken care of. Okay, let me see if there's anything left here.
How do you adjudicate that?
I think there's some truth to that, but as someone who writes a lot, I find the worst insult I can give my team is I say this reads like AI wrote it. I find that AI is kind of all chip, no salsa. It's pretty anodyne. I think of it as a great assistant, a great proofreader. I use it for statistics and data a lot, but I thought I was going to write my next book using AI and just collect a check. No, you can't do that. So far I don't, I don't.
But industry people you talk to in the investment community isn't.
Before we get into that, so there's a good underline of that mentality that I think is poisoning our public discourse. It's the lack of imagination of the people who are publicly discussing this about what you can do, and they're underestimating because they can't think of a way to use this in avenues that they've only found limited uses for this technology, and so it's a small benefit for them. That doesn't, and then they're using that misunderstanding of what's possible as that's as good as it is right now, whereas it's probably more the case that the way that they're talking to this model and the information that they're presenting to it is the reason why they're getting such limited results. And also, and combined with, as Scott was saying there, he was thinking, he thought that he'd be able to get the model, write the book, and he just collect a paycheck. Again, that's those overestimating of what it's capable of. You're still going to have to do a lot of hard work. But it's all the little things that you didn't tell it to do, or the imperfections, and the the ambiguity of what you said is why you get unsatisfactory results from the tool. And those are the reasons why we're going into this both underestimating and overestimating what these models can do.
The sense that like it's getting a lot better very fast.
Yeah, I keep in mind there is an economic incentive to catastrophizing around this.
Yeah.
When people
there's an
talk
economic
about,
incentive both ways, to catastrophize or to hype.
well, if you want to protect your industry, but I'll give you an example. Every year I pick a technology of the year. I picked AI in 22 and 23. In 24, I think a bigger, more transformative technology, and a lot of people laughed at this, is not AI. I think it's semaglutides. Talk to someone who's on a GLP-1 drug who's all over AI and ask them what's had a bigger impact on their lives. So I think AI, like the PC, like the semiconductor, like GPS, like nuclear fusion, I think it's going to be enormous. But when Sam Altman talks in hush phones about we need to be thoughtful about it going sentient, I think what he's...
So, two things before I let him complete his thought there. Behind any other advancement that humans are doing right now, there's probably large language models being used to do pattern recognition in the background, especially in the medical field. Pattern recognition is a huge aspect of detecting and treating disease. These models are deeply embedded in all of this stuff. It's the invisible uses of this technology that most people aren't aware of, and we won't be aware of it because it's not being discussed in a public sense. People aren't trying, like I said, media and politicians aren't trying to learn all the different areas that this technology is being used. And there was the other point. Let's go back a couple seconds because the other point he made.
Bigger impact on their lives. So I think AI, like the PC, like the semiconductor, like GPS, like nuclear fusion, I think it's going to be enormous. But when Sam Altman talks in hush phones about we need to be thoughtful about it going sentient, I think what he's saying is give me your fucking money. I am changing the world. This is world groundbreaking, scary technology. Want to make money?
So that's the other side of this, and that people like Sam Altman. And I think, again, this is where there's been a general I wouldn't say misrepresentation, a misunderstanding, or the assumption of if a model can speak to us in the way that we speak to each other, if it can pull out information and solve problems, that it's sentient. We don't know what sentience is. And yet, especially the folks that are on the AI model side, like Sam Altman, they do put a lot of lip service to the idea of we need to be wary when these tools become sentient, but there's a lot of harm that can happen between now and then, because we don't know where then is. We don't know what sentience actually is, coupled by the fact that there's some real central parts to this technology that we don't fully understand how it works. So how are we even going to be able to judge what sentience is? Like I said, I think personally, we're a long ways off from sentience, like something that actually is. And even then, I don't even know if it's a meaningful comparison. Because sentience to us is something of a human form, a singular being with a single mind, capable of doing specific things in a particular order. These tools can interact with millions of people simultaneously, and they can be turned on and off. It's not an equivalent conversation. And by portraying these things as someday they're going to be sentient, we're allowing ourselves to be misled in our expectations of what this technology is capable of now and what it's going to be capable of in the future. Instead, we should be looking at it as a tool, extremely powerful tool, that can automate huge swaths of human effort in ways that were never possible until this decade. And going forward, that scales faster, more efficiently, at a lower cost, with less hardware needs and energy needs as we get better at refining and building these tools. There's no, just because these models that require huge data centers and massive amounts of power in order to deliver a specific set of results today, we're certainly not doing this in the most efficient way. Part of our improvements are going to be, how do we get the same results at a lower cost, with lower power, with lower resources needed? And as that comes down over time, the same way that computers did the same thing, right? Our first computers took up floors on a building, and now the device on my watch is so much more powerful than those machines from the 40s and 50s. So that change of technology, and combined with the same type of hardware, will be able to run more powerful systems and be even more scalable. So it's about having a honest and transparent and open conversation about what can these tools do? How can we use these tools to solve our daily needs? How can we use these tools to reduce the inequality in our systems, to remove the corruption from our systems, to take the parts where humans can currently put their thumb on the scale and remove that ability, but still maintain the same integrity and transparency and the ideals that we built the systems for in the first place.
So you can build your own bunker from the oncoming rise of the robots. I think a lot of this is people self-important narcissism, that this is going to absolutely, because if you look at, for example, it's kind of hard to look at how it's impacted employment. They think there's a negative impact on entry-level jobs right now, but youth unemployment is at 10%, where it usually is. Unemployment's at 4.5%. I mean, you're seeing some layoffs of information-intensive workers, but it's kind of taken these companies back to where they were 2 or 3 years ago, post-COVID.
And also, it's like a lot of software jobs, coding, right? But like that would be
isn't that a
naturally
good
the jobs.
thing?
Yeah.
Do you have any coder? I've never met a more entitled group of assholes than the systems engineers in my companies demanding 30% raises every month. Couldn't happen to a nicer group of guys. Jeez.
That type of attitude doesn't help either. I understand he's just trying to be funny. But there's an underlying truth there. There's a real disconnect between the people who understand technology and build solutions on it and the people that are there creating and maintaining the public discourse, both on the media and the political side. And until those two groups come together and start working together, we're all destined for a pretty nasty future. Okay, I just scanned ahead, and I don't think there's anything else that I wanted to talk about from this video. But yeah, so that's my general thoughts about where we're at with these tools and why I'm trying to sound an alarm, and that as long as we're pitting the people involved in steering the public discourse and those of us on the IT solutions side, and as long as we don't have an honest conversation about what these tools are, how they work, what they're capable of, and what they're going to be capable of, we're destined for a world of hurt. On the other side, I think with public, open, transparent discourse and a real embrace of how do we use these tools to find the faults in our system, and how do we adjust our mindset so that we start putting together a system that is more fair and equitable, and use these tools to fight against the dangers that these very existence of these tools create. Those are the things that we need to focus on. And we need more people with technological savvy and technological understanding in the public discourse talking about these tools and suggesting ideas for how to incorporate them into ways to make our system more fair, more transparent, and ultimately cheaper overall. I think with the advent of both large language models for the automation of human thought and the parallel advancements in robotics for the automation of human labor that is our future. One way or another, eventually we're going to be creating a system that does all of the heavy lifting and allows us to live our lives free and happy in ways that improves the human condition for all of us and reduces that inequality. Anyway, I think that's it. I'm going to probably tag the two individuals in the video here, Tim and Scott. I don't expect much of a response, but hey, you never know. I might get somebody responding to me. But yeah, that's my thoughts. I just wanted to share this video because I thought, yeah, this is an interesting... It's that gap. We have a huge gap between what these tools can do and how they're being perceived and how they're being presented both positively and negatively in the public space. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your time. And I'll chat with you later. Bye-bye.